Well, yeah. Hey, just to reiterate a few of those announcements, you're going to want to make sure to sign up for a collective group. It's going to be phenomenal and spectacular, and there's nothing like doing life alongside other people. This is a big room with a good amount of people, and so it's essential to get into a smaller room and with less people to really get real and dig deep. So you're going to want to make sure to join one of those, and then we are so excited for Feed New Mexico Kids. I really do believe in faith that we are going to just show this city and just show people that young adults, even though we don't have a lot of money, we can be generous. You guys agree with me, yeah? That's a good cause to donate to. And I know that there's just this idea that if your community stopped existing, if your church gathering stopped existing, would the community surrounding it notice? And I think that we should be a community that notices, that is noticed for being generous. And so you're going to want to make sure to just be donating to that and just paying attention to that. But hey, it is so good to be here tonight with you guys. And I have to say, I am kind of glad I will never see that video ever again. Each week, I feel like I'm just re-traumatized watching that banana. I am the one who ate that banana, and I still have not recovered for it, so pray for me. But we're ending our series tonight, which makes me sad. And beginning tonight, I want to start off by just telling you that me as an individual, I love being comfortable. I have to be real with you guys. I love being comfortable. I love when I am in bed and my mattress is nice and cozy. And there's two most uncomfortable things I've ever experienced in my life. The first thing is going through puberty. That's pretty uncomfortable. The second thing I could say is the most uncomfortable experience I've ever been in, and just an uncomfortable place to be, is the back of a cop car. I can say that I've been in the back of a cop car twice in my life. The first time I was a kid and some police officers showed up to our school to convince us to not become criminals, and so we volunteered to sit in the back of a cop car and a police officer's car. And I have to say, it was kind of just strange. But when you're kind of volunteering to do something like that, it's like volunteering to get tased. Anyone ever been tased before? You know what you're getting yourself into. You know what I'm talking about? With that experience, I knew I was going to be uncomfortable in the back of this car. But I have to say, the second time I was in the back of a police officer's car, it was not up to me. For background, when I was 16, I loved photography. Any photographers in the room? Anybody got a sweet IG feed? I don't even know if people post photos on Instagram anymore. I loved taking photos at 16, and I loved one specific style of photography. I loved photographing abandoned buildings. Now, here's what you need to know about being a photographer who likes photographing abandoned buildings. See, the city does this thing where if you go inside an abandoned building, it's like illegal because it could like fall and collapse on you and kill you. So they make sure like it's outlawed to not do that. So to photograph the inside of an abandoned building, you have to do this little thing called trespassing. You know, it's just really minor. You just got to do it. When I was 16, this is like all I did. I would just go find abandoned buildings and photograph them. And my mom would get so upset with me that she told me one day, she says, "Nick, if you keep taking photos in abandoned buildings and the cops come to get you one day, I'm not bailing you out." And I said, "Mom, that's never going to happen." So I believe her, and I say, okay, well, that's why I'm never going to get caught. So literally that day, I go with some friends who shall not be named, and they say, "Hey, there's this abandoned building outside Santa Fe. It's really cool. We should check it out." I said, okay, I'm cool, and I do that because I'm 16 and I know everything. So we went. And we're hanging out. I might have used like a fire extinguisher and just taking photos, and there's this diner. And then all of a sudden, the worst thing could possibly happen when you're doing something you know you shouldn't be. There's somebody standing outside the diner doing this. Y'all know what I'm talking about? Doing this. He was on the phone. And he could be on the phone with two kinds of people in that situation. Somebody to come beat you up, or the police. So in that moment, I tell my friends, we need to run. We need to get out of here. So I jump out of the window. I'm running towards the car. And my friend, who's a much godlier man than I am, probably still is, and he says, "No, Nick, we need to wait for the cops to show up. We need to realize the repercussion of our actions." And I said, "No, I don't want to go to jail. I am wanting to go home." So we waited in his car for 2 hours. If it was up to me to drive, I would have been going 95 down the highway. So we wait for the police to show up. It eventually happens to the point that I'm in the back of the sheriff's car, and I have to say, it is not a very comfortable experience. I don't know. You'd expect maybe like some velour seats, maybe like a cup holder. Maybe they offer you a LaCroix. It's nothing like that. It's plastic, and you're sliding around everywhere, and you're like hitting your head on stuff. It's almost like they don't want you to be in the back of there, like they don't want it to be an enjoyable experience. I still remember to this day, walking up to my house with the sheriff, him knocking on my parents' door, and my parents' facial expressions, seeing me, little 16-year-old Nick, 125 pounds, standing there with this big sheriff, and just stone-cold silence. After he informs them of everything, I walk in, and my parents said the iconic phrase, some of us have heard this before, they said, "Nick, we're not just mad, we're disappointed in you." Oh, you can scream at me till your face is blue. You can slap me across the face for all I care. But the moment you tell me, I'm just disappointed. My soul is crushed. My soul is crushed. As a people pleaser, I'm like, please don't be disappointed in me. I'm a good child. Thankfully, the charges were dropped, and I'm not a felon. But I think often, as followers of Jesus, and maybe just as a non-follower of Jesus, it's easy to begin to believe you've let God down. I think it's easy to begin to believe God's disappointed in you. And I don't know what your perspective is. I don't know what your beliefs are. I don't know what your spiritual journey is. But I think all of us, if we were honest, in this room, could attest to the feeling of feeling like we've let God down. And I want to communicate to you tonight, through talking in the scriptures, finalizing and wrapping up our series about boundaries. I could talk about a lot of things. I could talk about boundaries with gender. I could talk about boundaries in culture. I could talk about boundaries in sexuality. I could talk about boundaries in work, rest, and life. And if we had like 4 more weeks, I'd do all that, but we're on limited time. And so I had to go in my mind and ask myself what to communicate to you about tonight. And I found that for many of us, we may have been showing up to this series. We may be consistently coming to some kind of church gathering. And a lot of the time, we're given application. A lot of the time, we're giving quick statements. Or a lot of the time, we're given ways and to work towards looking more like Jesus and loving people better. And for you, you may have been coming to this gathering, and I talk about dealing with hard relationships. I talk about knowing your own limitations. I talk about these lists of things. And for you, each week, you may feel like you failed every single one of those things. You may feel like when it comes to dealing with difficult people, you blew up on everybody that was difficult in your life that week. When talking about knowing your limitations and knowing that you are a weak person and you need help, you may have stumbled back into every single lifestyle choice you made prior to Jesus. And I want to recognize that. And to conclude the series, I don't think I'd be doing a good job as your pastor to not communicate the title and the concept of tonight effectively to conclude this series. If you're taking notes, I want you to write this down if you're able to. The title of our talk tonight is God Won't Give Up on You. God won't give up on you. And I feel like for many of us, that exact sentiment I voiced is where we find ourselves right now. We find ourselves repeating the same things, falling into the same behavior. That behavioral adjustment isn't working. The sin management isn't doing what it should. And we feel like a failure. But I want to communicate this to you tonight, my friends. God's not willing to give up on you. No matter how down bad you feel, no matter how far along you are, God's not willing to give up on you. And I wanted the title is God Can't Give Up on You, but then I said God can do anything, so that doesn't make sense. But the difference between you can't do something versus you won't do something, there's quite a choice there. Can't indicates there's no choice. Hey, I can't jump 6 feet vertically and dunk. Hey, I can't get a 4.5 GPA, even though I pay attention to every class. But choosing to not do something is more of a want, I won't. And God's choice over your life is that he is willing to not give up on you, as long as you have breath in your lungs. And so if you got a Bible, turn with me to Luke 15. I want to talk through a familiar story out of Luke 15. If you got a Bible, turn there. It's going to be Luke 15, verse 11. Luke 15, verse 11. The story we're reading tonight for you may be familiar. It's a story of this name of a prodigal son. For you, you may have grown up in church. You may have just been around any kind of culture around church, and so you're familiar with the prodigal son. And I want to challenge you tonight as we walk through the text and as I explain to you the concept of God not giving up on you. I want to challenge you to think about your own circumstances. I think it's very easy to often think about, man, I'm hearing this sermon and my friend really needs to hear this, so I'm going to share the podcast. Or, man, this sermon, it's really hitting home. And you start nudging your neighbor like, yeah, you're prodigal, all right. Yeah, you're running away. I just want to challenge you for you to lean in. For you to lean in. Because I think it's very easy for us, especially if you're a follower of Jesus, to look to other people and other people's circumstances in your life and associate this with them. So if you got a Bible, we're going to start reading in verse 11. And we're just going to start with the top. Then he said, a certain man had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portions of goods that falls to me. So he divided to them his livelihood. And not so many days after, the younger son gathered all together, journeyed to a far country, and there wasted his possessions on prodigal living. Prodigal just means wasteful. And we'll stop there. If you're taking notes, I want to help us walk through tonight 4 responses to God not giving up on us. God not giving up on us. The New York Times, they released an article post-2020, kind of in the middle of 2021. And what they did is they took a census of the average American. So they just took the median age, demographic of an American, and they interviewed multiple individuals. And they just asked them how their well-being is. They asked them how they are, how they're doing. And after conducting this mass study, they concluded this study that the average American post-COVID in American society is described by one word. This one word is languishing. Languishing. I'm not super smart, so I was like, what does languishing mean? That sounds like a licorice. I looked up languishing. It means to weaken over time. You could maybe associate it with when you're a kid and you were doing like little tail whips on your Razor scooter. You know what I'm talking about? You're hitting your ankles all day on that thing. And then your mom tells you to come inside for dinner. She's going to beat your, you know what? So you throw the scooter down, then you run inside, and then you kind of forget about scootering, and you pick up another thing, maybe a pogo stick if you're crazy like that. And you left your scooter outside, and it's rusting, and the rain hits it, and then you pick it up probably 2 years later, and that scooter has languished. It has fallen apart. I would associate languishing with that kind of process, something decomposing, something weakening, something breaking down. I think it's so fascinating that the New York Times associated the average person in America and their overall state of well-being as deteriorating. That blows me away. And I think of our story tonight, we're introduced to this young man and his father. And for context, if you're new to Scripture, what is happening in this moment is Jesus is doing something called telling a parable. Telling a parable is simply just giving a story with pictures and writing it out, and it's very poetic, kind of like tortoise and the hare if you want to kind of associate it with something. And he gives this parable because what Jesus has been doing is he's talking to an audience, he's talking to a crowd, and he's describing to them the character of God and his heart towards people like you and I, people who are sinners, people who are lost. And he gives 2 different examples up until this point of God's heart for others, God's heart for the lost. And up until this point, he's never used a person, an actual human in the situation. And this is the first time he does. In this story, he outlines a young man and his father. And what he begins is saying, this young man approaches his father. He says, Dad, once you die, I'm going to get money. It's kind of like life insurance. Once somebody dies, you get kind of that inheritance. This is like pre-life insurance. So he pretty much approaches his father and says, hey, all that money I get when you die, yeah, I want it right now. He tells his father, I wish pretty much you were dead so I can attain what you have to offer me. The father's willing to give it to him in this story, and then the son goes and wastes it on wild living. I think a lot of the time, when approaching the concept of what it means for God to not give up on us, a response we can have is to run. If you're taking notes, I believe this is one of the first responses we often do is our running. See, as humans, we run towards something. We all are running towards something. As humans, we are pursuing some kind of dream, some kind of idea. And I find that often in relationship to God, it's easy to run towards everything else besides Him. And along this topic of what the New York Times cited as the human condition currently, I'd have to ask you a question for your own well-being, but I'd phrase it differently. I'd ask you, how's your soul? How's your soul? See, as humans, we're more than just mere flesh and bone. We're eternal people. We're more than just skin and walking on this rock. We have a deep inner longing. Scripture would describe that as your soul. That humanity, when created, was made in the image of God, that God breathed His being into humanity. And you may say, Nick, I stubbed my toe in a corner and it starts bleeding and I think I'm going to die. How am I more than just flesh and bone? I feel pretty weak at times. I find that for many of us, we don't understand the degree to which we're more than just simply desire. And we're more than just simply what we do. That being made in the image of God, there is a deep longing created within each and every one of us. No matter your background, no matter your lifestyle, no matter how you identify, you and I were made in the image of God. And with that comes a soul. And with that comes this deep desire to achieve, this deep desire to be something different. Have you ever been in a situation or scenario where you've done whatever it may be, and you're excited about it, you're hyped about it, and then you do it, and you're like, wasn't all that kind of cracked up to be? I would say that we get many symptoms of understanding of having a soul. And I would ask you tonight, how's your soul? How is your well-being? Are you desiring? Are you longing? Are you hungry? Are you feeling empty? Asking that question is essential to understand what you're running to. Because see, my friends, as I mentioned, it's easy to run to everything except God. And in running to everything else, we think we will find satisfaction. We think in running to whatever thing society has told us is offered as the good life, I would call it. We believe these narratives every day of what the good life is. We believe on a daily basis, if I just accomplish this, then I'll be blank. And when understanding the depth and the desire of your soul, it's essential to ask yourself the question, what am I running to? See, in our story tonight, we see this man, this young man, and he's running towards something. We're not given much background about this parable, but I wonder, what lies did he begin to believe that this is what it means to live the good life? That taking all the money he can, running away as far as he can from home, squandering it on whatever it may be, alcohol, women, anything. What lies did he begin to believe and nurture in his mind to associate this is what it means to live a good life? I wonder. Let's keep reading at verse 14. But when he had spent it all, there arose a severe famine in that land, and he began to be in want. Then he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed swine. And he would gladly have filled his stomach with the pods that the swine ate, and no one gave him ever anything. Have you ever heard the phrase, everywhere you go, there you are? Everywhere you go, there you are. Doesn't matter what you're wearing, doesn't matter who you're with, doesn't matter your status or title or anything. Anywhere you go in life, you're going along with yourself. Nothing you can do can separate you from yourself. And I find a lot of the time, when we're going about our lives, we find this result of, I've done all I can, I've sought all the things I need to, but here I am. I think another response we can have to the idea that God's not willing to give up on us is our own result. Our result often is what we have sought after and seeked, and it results in this life of once everything stops flowing, once the experience quits, once no longer we're able to have what we previously did through circumstance. I think this is what brought so many people to their knees in 2020, is realizing all the distraction, all the craziness is no longer existent, that you're left with yourself at the end of the day. And it makes sense that this New York Times article describes humanity as languishing. I believe that this young man, he began to believe this lie, and it was planted with the what ifs, and it was watered with his circumstances. I want to ask you tonight, pursuing the path you have, seeking after what you have, what has it resulted in your life? What is the result of seeking after what you have sought after? And are you satisfied? It's a genuine question. Are you satisfied with the result of where you've been? See, this young man was able to distract himself and fulfill himself up until the point it stopped flowing. I think it's fascinating. If you've ever visited a big city, there's always so much to do. I was just in Denver. Yeah, I just said that just to say that, okay, just so you know. In Denver, there's so much to do. Hey, you want to go get some ice cream? There's 5 ice cream shops. Hey, you want to go walk the bridge? There's 3 bridges. We could walk over the river, then we could walk downtown, and then you want to go shopping? We can go shopping. Oh, you want to do hiking? There's 36 hiking spots, and that's just 35 minutes away. Oh, you want to eat? Okay, what do you want? You want ramen? You want pizza? What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? It's like Tin Can Alley everywhere there, but better. And it's so funny to me. I'm in Denver this week. I'm doing all these things. I just begin to have this thought stewing of, isn't it fascinating that in the big cities, where there's all the young people flocking to, where there's all the experiences to be had, it's the highest levels of anxiety, it's the highest levels of isolation, it's the highest levels of loneliness, that it's almost like we build our own Tower of Babel in a way, to kind of distance ourselves and distract ourselves from what it means to be human, and we just kind of need to experience enough, then we'll be fulfilled, but we keep doing and wanting, and the cycle just repeats itself. That once you've experienced what it is like to sleep with whoever you want, you're still desiring, you're still wanting. Once you seek and desire what it means to fill your body with substances, you're still desiring and wanting. And I just have to ask myself, and maybe you have to ask yourself, is this all there is? Have you ever asked yourself that? Is this all there is? Just one experience after the other, wanting more and more and more. See, this is where this son finds himself. Once the distraction stops, he's left with himself. Everywhere you go, there you are. Let's keep reading and see what happens with him. The end of verse 16 to verse 17. But when he came to himself, when he realized, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have bread enough to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned, I have done wrong against heaven and before you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. And he arose and came to his father, but when he was still a great way off, his father saw him, and he had compassion, and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. See, this first 2 responses of our running, our desire seeking, and the result of that lifestyle, that's the bad news, okay? So that part is over. We all know that. We all understand that. We've lived that. That's the bad news. But here's the good news, is God has a response in the midst of him not giving up on you. And I believe this first result is his. It is God's seeking after you, God running after you. This is what this father did in this story. I was having a conversation with a friend last night, and we were talking about this narrative. And I think it's so fascinating that in this story, the father's position never changes. That the son is going everywhere, the son is doing everything, but the father himself, he never moves. And if you read in the text, it tells us, and from a long way off, he saw him, and he had compassion. This connotates that the father has been looking. The father has been seeking his own son. And I just like to always ask questions of the text of, how long was he looking for him for? Was it every day that he'd stand out on the road and wait for him to come home? And I love that the first response is compassion. It's not that the father saw him and detested him. The father saw him and was disgusted with what he did. The father saw him from a long way off and had compassion. So my friends, in this narrative, the father is Jesus. The father is God towards his people. In this narrative, Jesus is telling this story to depict God's heart for humanity. And I just can't help but realize in this story that God's love outpaces your mistakes. God's love outpaces your mistakes. That before you are able to recount everything you did, that before you're able to understand the depth of your sin, God's seeking after you. And I'm not much of a runner. I actually kind of hate running. Shin splints suck. Bicycle all day. But I have some friends who are into running, and they're doing some marathons, and they share with me that the tip to running a marathon is all about pace. You think it's like, I'm just going to run as fast and as hard as possible and as quick and as I'm just going to get there. But they share with me that it's all about pace. It's all about timing. And I just can't help but think of this picture of God's pace is far beyond our depth of mistakes, that he's ready to meet us at any moment in the midst of our mess. And all it takes is turning to him. What a profound thought that all this time the Son has been running everywhere, doing who knows what, and the Father has stayed steadfast. And I think of that verse of God breathing into humanity, that God is nearer than our very breath. And that often when pursuing a lifestyle that we know we shouldn't be, when living in a way that makes us feel distance from God, God's position has never changed. He's always stayed waiting for us to come home, to return to him. That before you were not wanting to be seen, he saw you. When you're in the midst of your darkest place, he saw you, he was with you. This is God's response, that he's running after us. We were running away, but he's running after us. That you may feel like you're trying to find God, he's seeking after you. He's seeking you even before he is a thought in your mind. I love this idea of this Father seeking after you. So let's keep reading this compassion that this Father has on him. But the Father said to his servants, I went way too far. Verse 21, and the Son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the Father said to his servants, bring out the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet, and bring the fatted calf here and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to be merry. So we have our own form of running. We run away. We have our own results of what comes to the point of when we run away. God has his own form of running after us, and he has his own form of results after running after us. See, God's intention for your life, that when you've returned him, when you've gone back to him, turned your face to him, is for reconciliation. And I look at these points, I look at these things that this Father does, and they're all symbolical. Put on the best robe, put on the ring, put on the sandals. What that would mean is being back a part of the family, most likely a signet ring. That this is him symbolizing to the Son, you're part of the family now. At one point, your desires turned to death, and we thought you were gone forever, but you're a part of this family, no matter the mistakes you've made. And bring the fatted calf here and kill it, and let us eat and be merry, for my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and he is found. See, in the midst of God restoring us, he gives us two things. He gives us belonging and he gives us identity. I find for us as young individuals, Gen Z, one of the greatest struggles we face is finding, where do I fit in and what am I? What is my identity? Where do I belong and what is my identity? And I find that God, in the midst of his goodness and his grace, he offers those two things to us. This is his result. The reality is this, my friends. I think often we look at this story, and it's very easy for us to think about the prodigal son. Often parents, when their children are not following Jesus or living out the way of Jesus, they say, I have a prodigal. And that's true. They have a prodigal son, technically. But I think we do something interesting with this story. we kind of make it a one-off. We kind of make it like a season of life. Like, oh, I remember when I was a prodigal. I remember when I turned to my own thing and I didn't follow God's way. But I think we miss the point in that every day we're the prodigal. I believe every day it's a choice between choosing God's design for your life or your own desire. Every day we are the prodigal son. Every day Nick wakes up, I have to make the choice between what does Nick want to do today? Nick wants to be really selfish and be super sinful. Or what is the way of Jesus? And I'm just so thankful for this verse in the scriptures that his mercies are new every morning. That the day before this, you may have chose your own way all day. But it's when you return to him, he's ready to accept you. He's ready to extend that mercy to you. And I think for many of us, we're kind of writing off the idea of prodigal, and we're associating it with just one point of lifestyle. When the reality is it's every day we're the prodigal. And so in conclusion of having the band come back up and closing out tonight, which means I have like 5 more points, I just want to read to you Psalm 107. I came across this psalm today and introing with this concept of how's your soul? And you may have run this litmus of questions in your mind of how is my soul? How have I been doing? Have I been fulfilled? Do I long deeply? You may ask yourself this question. And I'm just brought to Psalm 107 because it just reinstates and communicates God's heart for his people. It says this, "Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his mercy endures forever. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, whom he has redeemed from the hand of the enemy, and gathered out of the lands, from the east and from the west, from the north and from the south. They wandered in the wilderness in a desolate way. They found no city to dwell in, hungry and thirsty. Their soul fainted in them. Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he delivered them out of their distress. And he led them forth by the right way, that they may go to a city for a dwelling place. Oh, that men would give thanks to the Lord for his goodness and for his wonderful works, to the children of men, for he satisfies the longing soul, and he fills the hungry soul with goodness." Is your soul hungry tonight? I find that often due to experience and circumstance, the pain we experience in the life we go through, it's easy to run our own way. It's easy to turn to whatever thing offered us pleasure prior. And that reality is so often this cycle we get stuck in. And we sit in a service and we do our quiet time and we listen to Maverick City and we still struggle with the same things and we still mess up and we still don't get it right all the time. And we don't realize that the process of following Jesus is that he has compassion on the brokenhearted. That when you fall short, when you do things you shouldn't, it's not because God doesn't want you to have fun. It's because it breaks you and it breaks his heart. And so in concluding tonight, I just want to ask you, how's your soul? And then I want to ask a follow-up question. Have you been running? What have you been running to? And talking about boundaries and talking about what it means to love people better and grow relationship to Jesus deeper. What have you been running to? Let me pray for us. Father, thank you for these friends. Thank you for these people. Thank you for just who you are. Thank you for seeking after us. Thank you that despite our circumstances, that despite our shortcomings, you seek compassion. You seek us and you see us. And Lord, I just want to lift up any individual in this space tonight that feels languished, that feels weakened, that feels like they're falling apart. Lord, I just pray over them that you may be with them. Lord, I pray over them that they may turn to you, that, Lord, they may stop seeking after these things that over and over again have just left them feeling emptier than before, because it breaks your heart. And so, Father, we want to dedicate these things to you. Help us to just lower our barriers and be honest with ourselves and those around us of how we've ran away. of in our heart how we've just sought after everything else except for you. So, Lord, I thank you for these people. I thank you for this gathering. Pray this in your name. Amen. All right, y'all. Let's worship.